Josip Broz Tito was a Yugoslav revolutionary and statesman, serving in various roles from 1943 until his death in 1980. During World War II he was the leader of the Partisans, often regarded as the most effective resistance movement in occupied Europe. While his presidency has been criticized as authoritarian, Tito was seen by most as a benevolent dictator due to his successful economic and diplomatic policies and was a popular public figure both in Yugoslavia and abroad. Viewed as a unifying symbol, his internal policies successfully maintained the peaceful coexistence of the nations of the Yugoslav Federation. He gained international attention as the chief leader of the non-aligned movement, working with Jawaharlal Nehru of India, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt and Sukarno of Indonesia. He was General Secretary of the League of Communists of Yugoslavia, and went on to lead the World War II Yugoslav guerrilla movement, the Partisans. After the war, he was the Prime Minister, President of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. From 1943 to his death in 1980, he held the rank of Marshal of Yugoslavia, serving as the Supreme Commander of the Yugoslav military, the Yugoslav People's Army. With a highly favorable reputation abroad in both Cold War blocs, Josip Broz Tito received some 98 foreign decorations, including the Legion of Honor and the Order of the Bath. Josip was born as the seventh child to Croat father Franjo Broz and Slovene mother Marija Javarec in the village of Kumrovec in Croatia. Drafted into military service, he distinguished himself, becoming the youngest sergeant major in the Austro-Hungarian army. After being seriously wounded and captured by the Imperial Russians during World War I, Josip was sent to a work camp in the Ural Mountains. He participated in the October Revolution, and later joined a Red Guard unit in Omsk. Upon his return home, Broz found himself in the newly established Kingdom of Yugoslavia, where he joined the Communist Party of Yugoslavia. Tito was the chief architect of the Second Yugoslavia, a socialist federation that lasted from 1943 to 1991 (92). Despite being one of the founders of Cominform, he was also the first Cominform member to defy Soviet hegemony. A backer of independent roads to socialism, he was one of the main forces behind the non-aligned movement, and its first secretary-general. He supported the policy of non-alignment between the two hostile blocs in the Cold War. Such successful diplomatic and economic policies allowed Tito to preside over the Yugoslav economic boom and expansion of the 1960s and 1970s. His internal policies included the suppression of nationalist sentiment and the promotion of the brotherhood and unity of the six Yugoslav nations. After Tito's death in 1980, tensions between the Yugoslav republics emerged and in 1991 the country disintegrated and went into a series of civil wars and unrest that lasted the rest of the decade and continued to impact most of the former Yugoslav republics. He remains a very controversial figure. Early life, pre-World War I. Josip Broz was born on May 7, 1892 in Kumrovec, in the northern Croatian region of Vatsko Zagorje in Austria-Hungary. He was the seventh child of Franjo and Marija Broz. His father, Franjo Broz, was a Croat, while his mother Marija was a Slovene. His parents were married on January 21, 1891. After spending part of his childhood years with his maternal grandfather Martin Javarec in the Slovenian village of Podsreda, he entered primary school in 1900 at Kumrovec. He failed the second grade and graduated in 1905. In 1907 he moved out of the rural environment and started working as a machinist's apprentice in Sisak. There, he became aware of the labor movement and celebrated May 1 a Euro Labor Day for the first time. In 1910, he joined the Union of Metallurgy Workers and at the same time the Social Democratic Party of Croatia and Slavonia. Between 1911 and 1913, Broz worked for shorter periods in Kamnik, Senkov, Munich and Mannheim, where he worked for the Benz car factory. Then he went to Wiener Neustadt, Austria, and worked as a test driver for Daimler. In the autumn of 1913, he was conscripted into the Austro-Hungarian army. He was sent to a school for non-commissioned officers and became a sergeant, serving in the 25th Croatian Regiment based in Zagreb. In May 1914, Broz won a silver medal at an army fencing competition in Budapest. At the outbreak of World War I in 1914, he was sent to Ruma, where he was arrested for anti-war propaganda and imprisoned in the Petrovaradin fortress. In January 1915, he was sent to the Eastern Front in Galicia to fight against Russia. He distinguished himself as a capable soldier, becoming the youngest sergeant major in the Austro-Hungarian army. For his bravery in the face of the enemy, he was recommended for the Silver Bravery Medal but was taken prisoner of war before it could be formally presented. On March 25, 1915, while in Bukovina, he was seriously wounded and captured by the Russians. Prisoner and agent, after 13 months at the hospital, Broz was sent to a work camp in the Ural Mountains where prisoners selected him for their camp leader. In February 1917, revolting workers broke into the prison and freed the prisoners. Broz subsequently joined a Bolshevik group. In April 1917, he was arrested again but managed to escape and participate in the July Days demonstrations in Petrograd on July 17, 1917. On his way to Finland, Broz was caught and imprisoned in the Peter and Paul fortress for 3 weeks. He was again sent to Kunga, but escaped from the train. He hid with a Russian family in Omsk, Siberia where he met his future wife Plagica Belousova. After the October Revolution, he joined a Red Guard unit in Omsk. Following a White counter-offensive, he fled to Kachzia and subsequently returned to Omsk, where he married Belousova. In the spring of 1918, he joined the Yugoslav section of the Russian Communist Party. By June of the same year, Broz left Omsk to find work and support his family, and was employed as a mechanic near Omsk for a year. In January 1920, he and his wife made a long and difficult journey home to Yugoslavia where he arrived in September. Upon his return, Broz joined the Communist Party of Yugoslavia. The CPY's influence on the political life of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was growing rapidly. In the 1920 elections the Communists won 59 seats in the parliament and became the third strongest party. Winning numerous local elections, they gained a stronghold in the second-largest city of Zagreb, electing Svito Zardelija for mayor. After the assassination of Milorad Rakovic, the Yugoslav Minister of the Interior, by a young communist on August 2, 1921, the CPY was declared illegal under the Yugoslav State Security Act of 1921. During 1920 and 1921 all Communist I mandates were nullified. Broz continued his work underground despite pressure on communists from the government. American Samoa, 1921 began. He moved to Veliko Trejstvo near Bjelova and found work as a machinist. In 1925, Broz moved to Kraljevica where he started working at a shipyard. He was elected as a union leader and a year later he led a shipyard strike. He was fired and moved to Belgrade, where he worked in a train coach factory and Smederevska Palanka. He was elected as workers' commissary but was fired as soon as his CPY membership was revealed. Broz then moved to Zagreb, where he was appointed secretary of Metal Workers' Union of Croatia. In 1928, he became the Zagreb branch secretary of the CPY. In the same year he was arrested, tried in court for his illegal communist activities, and sent to jail. During his 5 years at Lepoglava prison he met Moa Pijard, who became his ideological mentor. After his release, he lived incognito and assumed a number of noms de guerre, among them Walter, and Tito. In 1934 the Zagreb Provincial Committee sent Tito to Vienna where all the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia has sought refuge. He was appointed to the committee and started to appoint allies to him, among them Edvard Kardelj, Milovan Ilas, Alexander Rankovic and Boris Kudria. In 1935, Tito traveled to the Soviet Union, working for a year in the Balkan section of Comintern. He was a member of the Soviet Communist Party and the Soviet Secret Police. Tito was also involved in recruiting for the Dimitrov Battalion, a group of volunteers serving in the Spanish Civil War. In 1936, the Comintern sent Comrade Walter back to Yugoslavia to purge the Communist Party there. In 1937, Stalin had the Secretary-General of the CPY, Milan Gorka, murdered in Moscow. Subsequently Tito was appointed Secretary-General of the still outlawed CPY. World War II, resistance in Yugoslavia. On April 6, 1941, German forces, with Hungarian and Italian assistance, launched an invasion of Yugoslavia. On April 10, 1941, Slovo-Kvartnik proclaimed the independent state of Croatia, and Tito responded by forming a military committee within the Central Committee of the Yugoslav Communist Party. Attacked from all sides, the armed forces of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia quickly crumbled. On April 17, 1941, after King Peter II and other members of the government fled the country, the remaining representatives of the government and military met with the German officials in Belgrade. They quickly agreed to end military resistance. On May 1, 1941, Tito issued a pamphlet calling on the people to unite in a battle against the occupation. On June 27, 1941, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia appointed Tito Commander-in-Chief of all Project National Liberation military forces. On July 1, 1941, the Comintern sent precise instructions calling for immediate action. Despite conflicts with the rival monarchic Chetnik movement, Tito's partisans succeeded in liberating territory, notably the Republic of Way 3/4 Ice. During this period, Tito held talks with Chetnik leader Drila 3/4 Mihailovia on September 19 and October 27, 1941. It is said that Tito ordered his forces to assist escaping Jews, and that more than 2,000 Jews fought directly for Tito. On December 21, 1941, the partisans created the First Proletarian Brigade, and on March 1, 1942, Tito created the Second Proletarian Brigade. In liberated territories, the partisans organized people's committees to act as civilian government. The Anti-Fascist Council of National Liberation of Yugoslavia convened in Bihor on 26 November 27, 1942 and in Jej on November 29, 1943. In the two sessions, the resistance representatives established the basis for post-war organization of the country, deciding on a federation of the Yugoslav nations. In Jej, a 67-member presidency was elected and established a 9-member National Committee of Liberation as a de facto provisional government. Tito was named president of the National Committee of Liberation. With the growing possibility of an Allied invasion in the Balkans, the Axis began to divert more resources to the destruction of the partisans' main force and its high command. This meant, among other things, a concerted German effort to capture Josip Broz Tito personally. On May 25, 1944, he managed to evade the Germans after the raid on Drvar, an airborne assault outside his Drvar headquarters in Bosnia. After the partisans managed to endure and avoid these intense Axis attacks between January and June 1943, and the extent of Chetnik collaboration became evident, Allied leaders switched their support from Drila 3/4 Mihailovia to Tito. King Peter II, American President Franklin Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill joined Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin in officially recognizing Tito and the partisans at the Tehran Conference. This resulted in Allied aid being parachuted behind Axis lines to assist the partisans. On June 17, 1944, on the Dalmatian island of Vis, the Treaty of Vis was signed in an attempt to merge Tito's government with the government in exile of King Peter II. The Balkan Air Force was formed in June 1944 to control operations that were mainly aimed at aiding his forces. On September 12, 1944, King Peter II called on all Yugoslavs to come together under Tito's leadership and stated that those who did not were traitors, by which time Tito was recognized by all Allied authorities as the Prime Minister of Yugoslavia, in addition to Commander-in-Chief Yugoslav forces. On September 28, 1944, the Telegraph Agency of the Soviet Union reported that Tito signed an agreement with the Soviet Union allowing temporary entry of Soviet troops into Yugoslav territory, which allowed the Red Army to assist in operations in the northeastern areas of Yugoslavia. With their strategic right flank secured by the Allied advance, the partisans prepared and executed a massive general offensive which succeeded in breaking through German lines and forcing a retreat beyond Yugoslav borders. After the partisan victory and the end of hostilities in Europe, All external forces were ordered off Yugoslav territory. In the final days of World War II in Yugoslavia, units of the Partisans were responsible for atrocities after the repatriations of Bleiburg, and accusations of culpability were later raised at the Yugoslav leadership under Tito. At the time, Josip Broz Tito repeatedly issued calls for surrender to the retreating column, offering amnesty and attempting to avoid a disorderly surrender. On May 14 he dispatched a telegram to the Supreme Headquarters Slovene Partisan Army prohibiting in the sternest language the execution of prisoners of war and commanding the transfer of the possible suspects to a military court. You are to undertake the most energetic measures to prevent at all costs any killing of prisoners of war and of those arrested by military units, state organs or individuals. If there are persons among the prisoners and arrestees who should answer for war crimes, they are to be handed over immediately to military courts pending due process. Aftermath. On March 7, 1945, the Provisional Government of the Democratic Federal Yugoslavia was assembled in Belgrade by Josip Broz Tito, while the provisional name allowed for either a republic or monarchy. This government was headed by Tito as Provisional Yugoslav Prime Minister and included representatives from the royalist government in exile, among others Ivan Angstrom or Bahia. In accordance with the agreement between resistance leaders and the government in exile, post-war elections were held to determine the form of government. In November 1945, Tito's pro-Republican People's Front, led by the Communist Party of Yugoslavia, won the elections with an overwhelming majority, the vote having been boycotted by monarchists. During the period, Tito evidently enjoyed massive popular support due to being generally viewed by the populace as the liberator of Yugoslavia. The Yugoslav administration in the immediate post-war period managed to unite a country that had been severely affected by ultra-nationalist upheavals and war devastation, while successfully suppressing the nationalist sentiments of the various nations in favor of tolerance, and the common Yugoslav goal. After the overwhelming electoral victory, Tito was confirmed as the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the DFY. The country was soon renamed the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia. On November 29, 1945, King Peter II was formally deposed by the Yugoslav Constituent Assembly. The assembly drafted a new republican constitution soon afterwards. Yugoslavia organized the Yugoslav People's Army from the partisan movement and became the fourth strongest army in Europe at the time. The State Security Administration was also formed as the new secret police, along with a security agency, the Department of People's Security, OZNA. Yugoslav intelligence was charged with imprisoning and bringing to trial large numbers of Nazi collaborators. Controversially, this included Catholic clergymen due to the widespread involvement of Croatian Catholic clergy with the Ustaša regime. Drina Three-Quarters Mihajlović was found guilty of collaboration, high treason and war crimes and was subsequently executed by firing squad in July 1946. Prime Minister Josip Broz Tito met with the President of the Bishops' Conference of Yugoslavia, Alojzija Stepinac on June 4, 1945, 2 days after his release from imprisonment. The two could not reach an agreement on the state of the Catholic Church. Under Stepinac's leadership, the Bishops' Conference released a letter condemning alleged partisan war crimes in September, 1945. The following year Stepinac was arrested and put on trial. In October 1946, in its first special session for 75 years, the Vatican excommunicated Tito and the Yugoslav government for sentencing Stepinac to 16 years in prison on charges of assisting Ustaša terror and of supporting forced conversions of Serbs to Catholicism. Stepinac received preferential treatment in recognition of his status and the sentence was soon shortened and reduced to house arrest, with the option of emigration open to the Archbishop. At the conclusion of the Informero period, reforms rendered Yugoslavia considerably more religiously liberal than the Eastern Bloc states. In the first post-war years Tito was widely considered a communist leader very loyal to Moscow, indeed, he was often viewed as second only to Stalin in the Eastern Bloc. In fact, Stalin and Tito had an uneasy alliance from the start, with Stalin considering Tito too independent. Tito-Stalin split. Unlike other new communist states in East Central Europe, Yugoslavia liberated itself from Axis domination with limited direct support from the Red Army. Tito's leading role in liberating Yugoslavia not only greatly strengthened his position in his party and among the Yugoslav people, but also caused him to be more insistent that Yugoslavia had more room to follow its own interests than other bloc leaders who had more reasons to recognize Soviet efforts in helping them liberate their own countries from Axis control. Although Tito was formerly an ally of Stalin after World War II, the Soviets had set up a spy ring in the Yugoslav party as early as 1945, giving way to an uneasy alliance. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, there occurred several armed incidents between Yugoslavia and the Western Allies. Following the war, Yugoslavia acquired the Italian territory of Istria as well as the cities of Zadar and Rijeka. Yugoslav leadership was looking to incorporate Trieste into the country as well, which was opposed by Western allies. This led to several armed incidents, notably attacks by Yugoslav fighter planes on U.S. transport aircraft, causing bitter criticism from the West. From 1945 to 1948, at least 4 U.S. aircraft were shot down. Stalin was opposed to these provocations, as he felt the USSR unready to face the West in open war so soon after the losses of World War II. In addition, Tito was openly supportive of the communist side in the Greek Civil War, while Stalin kept his distance, having agreed with Churchill not to pursue Soviet interests there, although he did support the Greek communist struggle politically, as demonstrated in several assemblies of the UN Security Council. In 1948, motivated by the desire to create a strong independent economy, Tito modeled his economic development plan independently from Moscow, which resulted in a diplomatic escalation followed by a bitter exchange of letters in which Tito affirmed that we study and take as an example the Soviet system, but we are developing socialism in our country in somewhat different forms. No matter how much each of us loves the land of socialism, the USSR, he can in no case love his own country less. The Soviet answer on May 4 admonished Tito and the Communist Party of Yugoslavia for failing to admit and correct its mistakes, and went on to accuse them of being too proud of their successes against the Germans, maintaining that the Red Army had saved them from destruction. Tito's response on May 17 suggested that the matter be settled at the meeting of the Cominform to be held that June. However, Tito did not attend the second meeting of the Cominform, fearing that Yugoslavia was to be openly attacked. In 1949 the crisis nearly escalated into an armed conflict, as Hungarian and Soviet forces were massing on the northern Yugoslav frontier. On June 28, the other member countries expelled Yugoslavia, citing nationalist elements that had managed in the course of the past 5 or 6 months to reach a dominant position in the leadership of the CPY. The assumption in Moscow was that once it was known that he had lost Soviet approval, Tito would collapse. I will shake my little finger and there will be no more Tito, unregistered trademark, Stalin remarked. The expulsion effectively banished Yugoslavia from the International Association of Socialist States, while other socialist states of Eastern Europe subsequently underwent purges of alleged Titoists. Stalin took the matter personally and arranged several assassination attempts on Tito, none of which succeeded. In a correspondence between the two leaders, Tito openly wrote, "Stop sending people to kill me. We've already captured 5 of them, one of them with a bomb and another with a rifle. If you don't stop sending killers, I'll send one to Moscow, and I won't have to send a second." Tito's estrangement from the USSR enabled Yugoslavia to obtain US aid via the Economic Cooperation Administration, the same US aid institution which administered the Marshall Plan. Still, he did not agree to align with the West, which was a common consequence of accepting American aid at the time. After Stalin's death in 1953, relations with the USSR were relaxed and he began to receive aid as well from the Comecon. In this way, Tito played East-West antagonism to his advantage. Instead of choosing sides, he was instrumental in kick-starting the non-aligned movement, which would function as a third way for countries interested in staying outside of the East-West divide. The event was significant not only for Yugoslavia and Tito, but also for the global development of socialism, since it was the first major split between communist states, casting doubt on Comintern's claims for socialism to be a unified force that would eventually control the whole world, as Tito became the first socialist leader to defy Stalin's leadership in the Cominform. This rift with the Soviet Union brought Tito much international recognition, but also triggered a period of instability often referred to as the Informero period. Tito's form of communism was labeled Titoism by Moscow, which encouraged purges against suspected Titoites throughout the Eastern Bloc. On June 26, 1950, the National Assembly supported a crucial bill written by Milovan Ilas and Tito about self-management, a type of cooperative independent socialist experiment that introduced profit-sharing and workplace democracy in previously state-run enterprises, which then became the direct social ownership of the employees. On January 13, 1953, they established that the law on self-management was the basis of the entire social order in Yugoslavia. Tito also succeeded Ivan Riber as the president of Yugoslavia on January 14, 1953. After Stalin's death, Tito rejected the USSR's invitation for a visit to discuss normalization of relations between two nations. Nikita Khrushchev and Nikolai Bulganin visited Tito in Belgrade in 1955 and apologized for wrongdoings by Stalin's administration. Tito visited the USSR in 1956, which signaled to the world that animosity between Yugoslavia and USSR was easing. However, the relationship between the USSR and Yugoslavia would reach another low in the late 1960s. Commenting on the crisis, Tito concluded that the truth is that it is, at best, disloyal and unobjective behavior towards our party and the country. The result of a terrible blunder. Now the whole issue has been blown up to monstrous proportions, in order to destroy the respect enjoyed by our party and its leaders and to strip the Yugoslav nations of their glory and their heroic struggle, in order to trample underfoot all the great things our peoples have achieved by the tremendous sacrifices and by the rivers of blood they have shed, in order to destroy the unity of our party, which is the guarantor for the successful building of socialism in our country and the creation of a happier life for our people. The Tito-Stalin split had large ramifications for countries outside the USSR and Yugoslavia. It has, for example, been given as one of the reasons for the Slavonska 1/2 trial in Czechoslovakia, in which 14 high-level communist officials were purged, with 11 of them being executed. Stalin put pressure on Czechoslovakia to conduct purges in order to discourage the spread of the idea of a national path to socialism, which Tito espoused. Presidency Non-Alignment. Under Tito's leadership, Yugoslavia became a founding member of the non-aligned movement. In 1961, Tito co-founded the movement with Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, India's Jawaharlal Nehru, Indonesia's Sukarno and Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, in an action called the Initiative of Five, thus establishing strong ties with Third World countries. This move did much to improve Yugoslavia's diplomatic position. On September 1, 1961, Josip Broz Tito became the first Secretary-General of the non-aligned movement. Tito's foreign policy led to relationships with a variety of governments, such as exchanging visits with Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, where a street was named in his honor. Tito was notable for pursuing a foreign policy of neutrality during the Cold War and for establishing close ties with developing countries. Tito's strong belief in self-determination caused early rift with Stalin and consequently, the Eastern Bloc. His public speeches often reiterated that policy of neutrality and cooperation with all countries would be natural as long as these countries did not use their influence to pressure Yugoslavia to take sides. Relations with the United States and Western European nations were generally cordial. Yugoslavia had a liberal travel policy permitting foreigners to freely travel through the country and its citizens to travel worldwide, whereas it was limited by most communist countries. A number of Yugoslav citizens worked throughout Western Europe. Tito met many world leaders during his rule, such as Soviet rulers Joseph Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev and Leonid Brezhnev. Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, Indian politicians Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi. British Prime Ministers Winston Churchill, James Callaghan and Margaret Thatcher. U.S. Presidents Dwight D. Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. Other political leaders, Dignitaries and heads of state that Tito met at least once in his lifetime included Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Yasser Arafat, Willy Brandt, Helmut Schmidt, Georges Pompidou, Queen Elizabeth II, Hugo Feng, Kim Il-sung, Sukarno, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Suharto, Idi Amin, Haile Selassie, Kenneth Kaunda, Gaddafi, Eric Honecker, Nicolosa unregistered trademark Su and Janos Kardar. He also met numerous celebrities. In 1953, Tito travelled to Britain for a state visit and met Winston Churchill. He also toured Cambridge and visited the university library. Tito also developed warm relations with Burma under U Nu, travelling to the country in 1955 and again in 1959, though he didn't receive the same treatment in 1959 from the new leader, Ne Win. Because of its neutrality, Yugoslavia would often be rare among communist countries to have diplomatic relations with right-wing, anti-communist governments. For example, Yugoslavia was the only communist country allowed to have an embassy in Alfredo Stroessner's Paraguay. One notable exception to Yugoslavia's neutral stance toward anti-communist countries was Chile under Pinochet. Yugoslavia was one of many countries which severed diplomatic relations with Chile after Salvador Allende was overthrown. Yugoslavia also provided military aid and arms supplies to staunchly anti-communist regimes such as that of Guatemala under Miguel Eugenio Lejarud. Reforms. On April 7, 1963, the country changed its official name to the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Reforms encouraged private enterprise and greatly relaxed restrictions on freedom of speech and religious expression. Tito subsequently went on a tour of the Americas. In Chile, 2 government ministers resigned over his visit to that country. In fall of 1960, Tito met President Dwight D. Eisenhower at the United Nations General Assembly meeting. Tito and Eisenhower discussed a range of issues from arms control to economic development. When Eisenhower remarked that Yugoslavia's neutralism was neutral on his side, Tito replied that neutralism did not imply passivity but meant not taking sides. In 1966, an agreement with the Vatican, fostered in part by the death in 1960 of anti-communist Archbishop of Zagreb Alojzija Stepinac, and shifts in the Church's approach to resisting communism originating in the Second Vatican Council, accorded new freedom to the Yugoslav Roman Catholic Church, particularly to catechize and open seminaries. The agreement also eased tensions, which had prevented the naming of new bishops in Yugoslavia since 1945. Tito's new socialism met opposition from traditional communists, culminating in conspiracy headed by Alexander Rankovic. In the same year, Tito declared that communists must henceforth chart Yugoslavia's course by the force of their arguments. The State Security Administration saw its power scaled back and its staff reduced to 5,000. On January 1, 1967, Yugoslavia was the first communist country to open its borders to all foreign visitors and abolish visa requirements. In the same year, Tito became active in promoting a peaceful resolution of the Arab-Israeli conflict. His plan called for Arabs to recognize the State of Israel in exchange for territories Israel gained. In 1967, Tito offered Czechoslovak leader Alexander Dubček to fly to Prague on 3 hours' notice if Dubček needed help in facing down the Soviets. In April 1969, Tito removed Generals Ivan Gorenjak and Ray Tomovia in the aftermath of the invasion of Czechoslovakia due to the unpreparedness of the Yugoslav army to respond to a similar invasion of Yugoslavia. In 1971, Tito was re-elected as President of Yugoslavia by the Federal Assembly for the 6th time. In his speech before the Federal Assembly, he introduced 20 sweeping constitutional amendments that would provide an updated framework on which the country would be based. The amendments provided for a collective presidency, a 22-member body consisting of elected representatives from 6 republics and 2 autonomous provinces. The body would have a single chairman of the presidency and chairmanship would rotate among 6 republics. When the Federal Assembly fails to agree on legislation, the collective presidency would have the power to rule by decree. Amendments also provided for stronger cabinet with considerable power to initiate and pursue legislature independently from the Communist Party. Da 3/4 Emil Bajida was chosen as the premier. The new amendments aimed to decentralize the country by granting greater autonomy to republics and provinces. The federal government would retain authority only over foreign affairs, defense, internal security, monetary affairs, free trade within Yugoslavia, and development loans to poorer regions. Control of education, healthcare, and housing would be exercised entirely by the governments of the republics and the autonomous provinces. Tito's greatest strength, in the eyes of the Western communists, had been in suppressing nationalist insurrections and maintaining unity throughout the country. It was Tito's call for unity, and related methods, that held together the people of Yugoslavia. This ability was put to a test several times during his reign, notably during the Croatian Spring when the government suppressed both public demonstrations and dissenting opinions within the Communist Party. Despite this oppression, much of the MSBOC's demands were later realized with the new constitution, heavily backed by Tito himself against opposition from the Serbian branch of the party. On May 16, 1974, the new constitution was passed, and the aging Tito was named president for life, a status which he would enjoy for 5 years. Tito's visits to the United States avoided most of the Northeast due to large minorities of Yugoslav emigrants bitter about communism in Yugoslavia. Security for the state visits was usually high to keep him away from protesters, who would frequently burn the Yugoslav flag. During a visit to the United Nations in the late 1970s, emigrants shouted "Tito murderer" outside his New York hotel, for which he protested to United States authorities. Final years. After the constitutional changes of 1974, Tito began reducing his role in the day-to-day running of the state. He continued to travel abroad and receive foreign visitors, going to Beijing in 1977 and reconciling with the Chinese leadership that had once branded him a revisionist. In turn, Chairman Hu Guofeng visited Yugoslavia in 1979. In 1978, Tito traveled to the U.S. During the visit, strict security was imposed in Washington, D.C. owing to protests by anti-communist Croat, Serb and Albanian groups. Tito became increasingly ill over the course of 1979. During this time, Vila SRNA was built for his use near Moravia in the event of his recovery. On January 7 and again on January 11, 1980, Tito was admitted to the medical center in Ljubljana, the capital city of the senior Slovenia, with circulation problems in his legs. His left leg was amputated soon afterward due to arterial blockages and he died of gangrene at the medical center Ljubljana on 4 May 1980 at 15:05, 3 days short of his 88th birthday. His funeral drew many world statesmen. Based on the number of attending politicians and state delegations, at the time it was the largest state funeral in history. They included 4 kings, 31 presidents, 6 princes, 22 prime ministers and 47 ministers of foreign affairs. They came from both sides of the Cold War, from 128 different countries out of 154 UN members at the time. Reporting on his death, the New York Times commented, "Tito sought to improve life. Unlike others who rose to power on the communist wave after WWII, Tito did not long demand that his people suffer for a distant vision of a better life." After an initial Soviet-influenced bleak period, Tito moved toward radical improvement of life in the country. Yugoslavia gradually became a bright spot amid the general greyness of Eastern Europe. Tito was interred in a mausoleum in Belgrade, which forms part of a memorial complex in the grounds of the Museum of Yugoslav History. The actual mausoleum is called House of Flowers and numerous people visit the place as a shrine to better times. The museum keeps the gifts Tito received during his presidency. The collection also includes original prints of Los Caprichos by Francisco Goya, and many others. The government of Serbia has planned to merge it into the Museum of the History of Serbia. At the time of his death, speculation began about whether his successors could continue to hold Yugoslavia together. Ethnic divisions and conflict grew and eventually erupted in a series of Yugoslav wars a decade after his death. Legacy. During his life and especially in the first year after his death, several places were named after Tito. Several of these places have since returned to their original names, such as Pajorica, formerly Titograd, and Way 3/4 Ice, formerly Titovo Way 3/4 Ice, which reverted to its original name in 1992. Streets in Belgrade, the capital, have all reverted to their original pre-Euro World War II and pre-communist names as well. In 2004, Anton Augustina Ias' statue of Broz in his birthplace of Kumrovec was decapitated in an explosion. It was subsequently repaired. Twice in 2008, protests took place in Zagreb's Marshal Tito Square, organized by a group called Circle for the Square, with an aim to force the city government to rename it to its previous name, while a counter-protest by Citizens Initiative Against Ustašism accused the Circle for the Square of historical revisionism and neo-fascism. Croatian President Stjepan Mesić criticized the demonstration to change the name. In the Croatian coastal city of Opatija, the main street still bears the name of Marshal Tito, as do streets in numerous towns in Serbia, mostly in the country's north. One of the main streets in downtown Sarajevo is called Marshal Tito Street, and Tito's statue in a park in front of the university campus in Marajeva is a place where Bosnians and Sarajevans still today commemorate and pay tribute to Tito. The largest Tito monument in the world, about 10 am high, is located at Tito Square, the central square in Velanje, Slovenia. One of the main bridges in Slovenia's second-largest city of Maribor is Tito Bridge. The central square in Koper, the largest Slovenian port city, is as well named Tito Square. Every year a Brotherhood and Unity relay race is organized in Montenegro, Macedonia and Serbia, which ends at the House of Flowers in Belgrade on May 25, the final resting place of Tito. At the same time, runners in Slovenia, Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina set off for Kumrovec, Tito's birthplace in northern Croatia. The relay is a leftover from Yugoslav times, when young people made a similar yearly trek on foot through Yugoslavia that ended in Belgrade with a massive celebration. In the years following the dissolution of Yugoslavia, a number of historians have stated that human rights were suppressed in Yugoslavia under Tito, particularly in the first decade up until the Tito-Stalin split. On October 4, 2011, the Slovenian Constitutional Court found a 2009 naming of a street in Ljubljana after Tito to be unconstitutional. While several public areas in Slovenia do already bear Tito's name, on the issue of renaming an additional street the court ruled that the name Tito does not only symbolize the liberation of the territory of present-day Slovenia from fascist occupation in World War II, as claimed by the other party in the case, but also grave violations of human rights and basic freedoms, especially in the decade following World War II. The court, however, explicitly made it clear that the purpose of the review was not a verdict on Tito as a figure or on his concrete actions, as well as not a historical weighing of facts and circumstances. Slovenia has several streets and squares named after Tito, notably Tito Square in Velanje, incorporating a 10-meter statue. Tito has also been named as responsible for systematic eradication of the ethnic German population in Vojvodina by expulsions and mass executions following the collapse of the German occupation of Yugoslavia at the end of World War II, in contrast to his inclusive attitude towards other Yugoslav nationalities. Family and personal life: Tito carried on numerous affairs and was married several times. In 1918 he was brought to Omsk, Russia as a prisoner of war. There he met Plagica Belisova, who was then 13. He married her a year later, and she moved with him to Yugoslavia. Plagica bore him 5 children, but only their son Angstrom one-half Arko Leon survived. When Tito was jailed in 1928, she returned to Russia. After the divorce in 1936 she later remarried. In 1936, when Tito stayed at the Hotel Lux in Moscow, he met the Austrian comrade Lucia Bauer. They married in October 1936, but the records of this marriage were later erased. His next relationship was with Herta Haas, whom he married in 1940. Broz left for Belgrade after the April War, leaving Haas pregnant. In May 1941, she gave birth to their son, Alexander Miro Broz. All throughout his relationship with Haas, Tito had maintained a promiscuous life and had a parallel relationship with Davujanka Pornevia, who, under the codename Zdenka, served as a courier in the resistance and subsequently became his personal secretary. Haas and Tito suddenly parted company in 1943 in Jade during the second meeting of AVNOJ after she reportedly walked in on him and Davujanka. The last time Haas saw Broz was in 1946. Davujanka died of tuberculosis in 1946 and Tito insisted that she be buried in the backyard of the Belgrade, his Belgrade residence. His best-known wife was Jovanka Broz. Tito was just shy of his 59th birthday, while she was 27, when they finally married in April 1952, with State Security Chief Alexander Runkovia as the best man. Their eventual marriage came about somewhat unexpectedly since Tito actually rejected her some years earlier when his confidant Ivan Krajasic brought her in originally. At that time, she was in her early 20s and Tito, objecting to her energetic personality, opted for the more mature opera singer Zinka Kunk instead. Not one to be discouraged easily, Jovanka continued working at Belgrade, where she managed the staff and eventually got another chance after Tito's strange relationship with Zinka failed. Since Jovanka was the only female companion he married while in power, she also went down in history as Yugoslavia's first lady. Their relationship was not a happy one, however. It had gone through many, often public, ups and downs with episodes of infidelities and even allegations of preparation for a coup d'état by the latter pair. Certain unofficial reports suggest Tito and Jovanka even formally divorced in the late 1970s, shortly before his death. However, during Tito's funeral she was officially present as his wife, and later claimed rights for inheritance. The couple did not have any children. Tito's notable grandchildren include Aleksandra Broz, a prominent theatre director in Croatia, Svetlana Broz, a cardiologist and writer in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Josip Broz, Edvard Broz and Natalie Klasovski, an artisan of Bosnia-Herzegovina. As the president, Tito had access to extensive property associated with the office, and maintained a lavish lifestyle. In Belgrade he resided in the official residence, the Belgrade, and maintained a separate private home. The Broduni Islands were the site of the state's summer residence from 1949 on. The pavilion was designed by Joe E. Plenick, and included a zoo. Close to 100 foreign heads of state were to visit Tito at the island residence, along with film stars such as Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Sophia Loren, Carlo Ponti, and Gina Lollobrigida. Another residence was maintained at Lake Bled, while the grounds at Karanarevo were the site of diplomatic hunts. By 1974 the Yugoslav president had at his disposal 32 official residences, larger and small, the Yacht Galeb, a Boeing 727 is the presidential airplane, and the Blue Train. After Tito's death the presidential Boeing 727 was sold to Aviogenex, the Galeb remained docked in Montenegro, while the Blue Train was stored in a Serbian train shed for over 2 decades. While Tito was the person who held the office of president for by far the longest period, the associated property was not private and much of it continues to be in use by Yugoslav successor states, as public property, or maintained at the disposal of high-ranking officials. As regards knowledge of languages, Tito replied that he spoke Serbo-Croatian, German, Russian, and some English. A biographer also stated that he spoke Serbo-Croatian, Russian, Czech, Slovenian, German, understands and reads French and Italian, and also speaks Kyrgyz. Every federal unit had a town or city with historic significance from the World War II period renamed to have Tito's name included. The largest of these was Titograd, now Podgorica, the capital city of Montenegro. With the exception of Titograd, the cities were renamed simply by the addition of the adjective Titos. The cities were, language and identity dispute. There have been several controversies on Tito's pronunciation of Serbo-Croatian, with the NSA proposing the theory that Tito pronounced Serbo-Croatian the way Russian and Polish speakers pronounce it. However, the NSA failed to recognize that Tito was a native speaker of a very distinctive Kajavian dialect of Zagorje, whose speakers have difficulty speaking the standard Serbo-Croatian language, both in respect of phonology and morphology. The phonological values and common morphological mistakes made by Tito are based in the distinctive features of Kajovian dialect as it is spoken in his homeland Zagorje. Origin of the name Tito. While the name Tito first appeared as another Comintern code name in 1930s, several theories exist as to its origin. One theory states that the name originated from the Titan factory where he worked. Other explanations propose that Tito comes from the Serbo-Croatian variation of the name of Roman Emperor Titus, from Saint Titus, or from an acronym for Secret International Terrorist Organization. Another popular explanation of the sobriquet claims that it is a conjunction of two Serbo-Croatian words, ti, and tu. As the story goes, during the frantic times of his command, he would issue commands with those two words, by pointing to the person, and then task. This explanation for the name's origin is provided in Fitzroy Maclean's 1949 book, Eastern Approaches. Maclean later revisited and dispelled this explanation in his 1957 biography of Tito, The Heretic. There he states, "I have always liked this story, but I'm assured by Tito himself, who I suppose should know, that it is apocryphal." Yet another theory by one of Tito's biographers, Vladimir Dedijer, claimed that it might have come from the Croatian romantic writer, Tito Bridge. Awards and decorations, main article, Awards and decorations of Josip Broz Tito. Josip Broz Tito received a total of 119 awards and decorations from 60 countries around the world. 21 decorations were from Yugoslavia itself, 18 having been awarded once, and the Order of the National Hero on 3 occasions. Of the 98 international awards and decorations, 92 were received once, and 3 on 2 occasions. The most notable awards being the French Legion of Honor and National Order of Merit, the British Order of the Bath, the Soviet Order of Lenin, the Japanese Order of the Chrysanthemum, the German Federal Cross of Merit, and the Order of Merit of Italy. The decorations were seldom displayed, however. After the Tito-Stalin split of 1948 and his inauguration as president in 1953, Tito rarely wore his uniform except when present in a military function, and then only wore his Yugoslav ribbons for obvious practical reasons. The awards were displayed in full number only at his funeral in 1980. Tito's reputation as one of the Allied leaders of World War II, along with his diplomatic position as the founder of the non-aligned movement, was primarily the cause of the favorable international recognition. Domestic awards. Foreign awards. Here follows a short list including some of the more notable foreign awards and decorations of Josip Broz Tito. Some of the other foreign awards and decorations of Josip Broz Tito include Order of Merit, Order of Manuel Amador Guerrero, Order of Prince Henry, Order of Independence, Order of Merit, Order of the Nile, Order of the Condor of the Andes, Order of the Star of Romania, Order of the Gold Lion of the House of Nassau, Croix de Guerre, Order of the Cross of Grunwald, Czechoslovak War Cross, Decoration of Honor for Services to the Republic of Austria, Military Order of the White Lion, Nishani-Pakistan, Order of Al-Rafidin, Order of Karol I, Order of Georgi Dimitrov, Order of Karl Marx, Order of Manuel Amador Guerrero, Order of Michael the Brave, Order of Pahlavi, Order of Sukh-Bertar, Order of Suvorov, Order of the Liberator, Order of the October Revolution, Order of the Queen of Sheba, Order of the White Rose of Finland, Partisan Cross, Royal Order of Cambodia and Star of People's Friendship and Theory Thujhama. See also, List of places named after Josip Broz Tito, List of Yugoslav politicians, References, Notes. Footnotes. Bibliography, Antonia, Zdravo. Kokan, Ivan. Jelija, Maj. Angstrom Kunka, Ivan. Stvarangi Tito v Jugoslavij. Otoka Kirilovania, Orti, Phyllis. Tito, A Biography. McGraw-Hill, Banak, Ivo. With Stalin Against Tito, Cominformist Splits in Yugoslav Communism. Cornell University Press. ISBN A0-8014-2186-1. Barnett, Neil. Tito. House. ISBN A1-904950-31-0. Bonman, John. Death of the Father, An Anthropology of Indian Political Authority. Burfan Books. ISBN A1-57181-111-7. Dedija, Vladimir. Tito. Simon and Schuster, Dedija, Vladimir. Tito Speaks, His Self-Portrait and Struggle with Stalin. Weidenfeld and Nicholson, Lees, Lorraine M. Keeping Tito Afloat, the United States, Yugoslavia, and the Cold War. Pennsylvania State University Press. ISBN A0-253-34656-8. Pavlovich, Stevan K. Tito, Yugoslavia's Great Dictator. A Reassessment, London, Hurst, 1992. Ramet, Sabrina P. The Three Yugoslavias, State Building and Legitimation, 1918. Euro 2004. Indiana University Press. ISBN A0-271-01629-9. Ridley, Jasper. Tito, A Biography. Constable. ISBN A0-09-475610-4. Roberts, Walter A. Tito, Milovic and the Allies, 1941. Euro 1945. Duke University Press. ISBN A0-8223-0773-1. Swain, Geoffrey. Tito, A Biography. London, I.B. Tauris, 2010. Tomasevic, Jazo. Vucinic, Wayne S. Contemporary Yugoslavia, 20 Years of Socialist Experiment. University of California Press. Tomasevic, Jazo. War and Revolution in Yugoslavia, 1941. Euro 1945, The Chniks. Stanford University Press. ISBN A0-8047-0857-6. Tomasevic, Jazo. War and Revolution in Yugoslavia, 1941. Euro 1945, Occupation and Collaboration. Stanford University Press. ISBN A0-8047-0857-6. Winterhalter, Vico. In the Path of Tito. Abacus Press. Further reading, Batty, Peter. Hoodwinking Churchill, Tito's Great Confidence Trick. ISBN A978-0-85683-282-6. Bealoff, Nora. Tito's Flawed Legacy, Yugoslavia and the West since 1939. Westview Prairie. ISBN A0-8133-0322-2. Carter, April. Marshal Tito, A Bibliography. Greenwood Press. ISBN A0-313-28087-8. Ehlers, Milovan. Tito, The Story from Inside. Phoenix Press. ISBN A1-84212-047-6. McLean, Fitzroy. Disputed Barricade. London, Jonathan Caper, McLean, Fitzroy. Tito, A Pictorial Biography. McGraw-Hill. ISBN A0-07-044671-7. Pavlovich, Stevan K. Tito, Yugoslavia's Great Dictator, A Reassessment. Ohio State University Press. ISBN A0-8142-0601-8. Vukcevic, Boako Tito, Architect of Yugoslav Disintegration. Rivercross Publishing. ISBN A0-944957-46-3. West, Richard. Tito and the Rise and Fall of Yugoslavia. Basic Books. ISBN A0-7867-0332-6. External links. Josip Broz Tito Reference Archive at the Marxists Internet Archive. Unseen pictures from U.S. archives. Sign the first virtual memorial of Marshal Tito. A film clip. Aviation in the News. 194,422 is available for free download at the Internet Archive. More.